She threw herself in front of a speeding car to save a stranger's child, only to discover he was the son of a powerful CEO. Grateful, he offers her a lifeline. But as their worlds intertwine, a buried truth resurfaces, one that links her tragic past to everything he thought he knew. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Emma Lane's feet ached as she stepped off the late bus and trudged the final block toward her apartment. The cold wind whipped through her threadbare coat, tugging at her long brown hair. Her hands were red and dry from the double shift she'd just finished. Half the day teaching second grade at Westwood Elementary, the other half mopping floors at a downtown diner. This wasn't what she'd dreamed of at 28, but dreams didn't pay rent, and right now, rent was due. As she rounded the corner, clutching her grocery bag close, a sharp, panicked scream pierced the air. Emma's head snapped up. Across the intersection, a child had broken free from someone's grasp and was darting toward the street. The light turned green. Without thinking, Emma dropped her bag and sprinted. Her feet pounded the pavement, instincts kicking in. The luxury black SUV was closing in, horn blaring. Emma lunged just in time, scooping the boy into her arms and rolling them both onto the sidewalk. The car screeched to a halt inches from the curb. People screamed. Tires smoked. Emma lay panting on the concrete, the child clinging to her neck, trembling. A second later, heavy footsteps thundered toward them. "Noah," a man's voice barked. Emma looked up, right into the storm-gray eyes of a sharply dressed man in a long wool coat. His presence radiated authority, wealth, and power. Damien Kingston, CEO of Kingston Enterprises, the youngest self-made billionaire in the state. She recognized him from news articles and late-night headlines. But none of that mattered right now. He dropped to one knee, pulling the boy into his arms. "Are you hurt, Noah? Talk to me." "I'm okay," the boy whispered, pointing at Emma. "She saved me." Emma stood shakily, brushing gravel from her jeans. "He just ran. I didn't think. I just moved." Damien's eyes flicked to her, scanning her quickly. His jaw jawed. "You could have been killed." "I didn't really think about that," Emma said, her voice hoarse. "Are you his father?" "Yes, Damien Kingston. This is my son, Noah." Security guards flooded the scene, checking on both of them, offering a ride, calling medics. Emma shook her head. "I'm fine. Really?" Damien stood. He was tall, imposing, but composed. His voice was low and unreadable. "That was Rathlin, brave. You didn't even know him." Emma met his eyes, weary but steady. "He's a child. That's all I needed to know." A pause. "Let me compensate you for the trouble. You deserve more than a thank you." She straightened her back. "You can't put a price on a child's life." Another pause, this one longer. The wind rustled between them as their eyes locked. For a man who had built his empire on numbers and transactions, her answer struck something raw. Then she turned, picked up her scattered groceries, and walked away without waiting for a reply. He watched her go, unmoving. The next day, Emma was at Westwood Elementary before sunrise, grading math tests with fingers still sore from the rescue. She hadn't slept much, her body ached, and her mind kept replaying the near accident. Mid-morning, the principal stepped into her classroom. "Emma, there's someone here to see you." She blinked. "Now? In the office?" She walked the hallway with wary steps, brushing chalk dust from her sweater. When she entered the office, her heart nearly stopped. Damien Kingston stood there, crisp in a dark suit, towering and out of place in the modest school lobby. Noah stood beside him, holding a small stuffed dinosaur and grinning. Emma's brow furrowed. "Mr. Kingston? I didn't catch your name yesterday." "I'm away." He extended a hand. "Emma, we need to talk." They sat in the small conference room, and for once, Emma felt like the powerful one. She crossed her arms, unsure what this was about. "I looked into you," Damien said plainly. "You're an exceptional teacher, and, What you did yesterday, it wasn't something just anyone would have done. I told you I didn't do it for recognition. I know, that's why it matters. Emma glanced at Noah, who colored quietly in the corner. He doesn't speak much, Damien said. Not to most people. He's withdrawn, anxious, but with you, he's different. Emma softened slightly. Children sense who's safe. He's a bright boy, just needs patience. Damien nodded slowly. I want to offer you a position. She blinked. A position? I want you to be his personal tutor. At home. He's not thriving in traditional settings, and I need someone who won't give up on him. Emma hesitated. That's generous, but I'm not sure I'm the right. You're exactly the right person, Damien interrupted, and I'll make sure the compensation is more than fair. She looked at Noah, who glanced up and offered her a small smile. Her heart tugged. He reminded her of someone she'd lost. I don't do this for money, she whispered, but for him, I'll think about it. Damien didn't press her. He just nodded once, stood, and handed her a card. Let me know by tomorrow. He turned to leave, then paused. Thank you for saving him and for not asking for anything in return. Emma stared at the card in her hand long after they'd gone. By nightfall, her answer was clear. For the boy with the quiet smile, the one who reached for her hand without fear. She would say yes. The iron gates of the Kingston estate groaned open like a secret being reluctantly revealed. Emma Lane clutched her canvas bag tighter as the town car rolled past manicured hedges and up a long cobblestone driveway. The mansion came into view, massive and immaculately designed, every window shining like polished crystal. Its beauty was undeniable, but it radiated a kind of stillness that made her skin prickle. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum of silence. When the car stopped, a uniformed butler opened her door without a word. Emma stepped out, trying not to feel overwhelmed. She had worked in schools with crumbling ceilings and shared bathrooms. This world was alien. Miss Lade? The butler asked, voice clipped. She nodded, and he gestured toward the towering mahogany doors. This way. Inside, the air was cool and dry, carrying faint hints of sandalwood and money. The marble foyer glowed under chandeliers. Paintings, portraits of stone-faced ancestors lined the corridor. The walls, the floors, even the quiet were polished. Emma barely had time to absorb it all before she was led into a vast drawing room where Damien Kingston stood, back straight, arms crossed. He didn't smile, didn't greet her, just looked at her like she was a variable he hadn't yet solved. You're punctual, he said. I said I'd be here at noon, Emma replied, keeping her tone neutral. He nodded once. Your responsibilities are to begin today. Noah is in the study. You'll meet him first. My staff will assist you with anything else. Keep things professional. Keep them distant. She blinked. Distant? Ensued. My son doesn't do well with messiness, he said, already turning away. Your quarters are upstairs. You'll be provided with a weekly schedule. Emma paused, then followed the butler through the house. The halls were long and quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against your chest. The study door creaked open. Noah Kingston, 6 years old with large brown eyes and a head full of curls, sat on the floor surrounded by a scatter of puzzle pieces. His shoulders tensed as he glanced up, then softened when he saw her. Is Emma? His voice was unsure but hopeful. She knelt. Hi, Noah. Remember me? She asked softly. He nodded. You saved me. She smiled gently. You saved yourself. I just helped. He stood up slowly and wrapped his arms around her waist. The hug was sudden and uncoordinated, but Emma didn't move away. She closed her eyes for a second and held him back. I missed you, he whispered. I missed you too. They sat on the carpet, piecing puzzles together and chatting about dinosaurs, spaceships, and spaghetti. Emma didn't bring up worksheets or reading comprehension just yet. She wanted him to feel safe, and as the minutes passed, Noah began to glow. Not loudly, not with energy, but with ease, like he could finally breathe. Damien reappeared in the doorway at some point. Emma felt his presence before she saw him. His gaze was unreadable, arms still folded across his chest. But he didn't interrupt, he simply watched. Later that afternoon, the staff brought Emma to her assigned room. It was elegant, too elegant. Velvet drapes, a canopy bed, gold-trimmed mirror. The linens smelled like lavender. But there were no books, no personal photos, no clutter. It felt sterile. Perfect, but untouched. She unpacked slowly, placing a small photo of her mother and younger sister on the nightstand. It was the only thing she had carried with her between jobs. Dinner was served in the smaller dining room, a quiet place where only she and Noah were seated. No Damien, no Vanessa. Just the clinking of silverware and the soft mumbling of a little boy explaining why Tyrannosaurus Rex would win in a fight against a dragon. Emma listened, asked questions, and laughed with him. For the first time in days, she felt like herself. After dessert, Emma walked Noah upstairs and helped him brush his teeth, listening to him hum tunelessly. As she turned to leave his room, he tugged her hand. He handed her a folded sheet of paper, its edges slightly crumpled. She unfolded it. It was a drawing, 3 figures under a sun, one tall with black scribbles for hair, one small and smiling, one with a bun and a purple dress. Below, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "A real family?" Emma swallowed hard. That's us?" she asked. He nodded, suddenly shy. "I just like when you're here." Her heart twisted. "I like being here too, sweetheart." She returned to her room, holding the drawing like it was made of glass. She sat on the edge of the bed, tracing the crayon lines with her finger. The tears came, quietly. Tears she hadn't cried in a long time. For Noah, for herself, for all the empty places in between. A knock on her door startled her. She wiped her face quickly. "I'm in." The door opened, and a tall, striking woman entered. She wore navy heels and a blazer that cost more than Emma's monthly salary. Her blonde hair was perfectly pinned. Her eyes were colder than the marble floors. "I'm Vanessa Kingston," she said, "Damien's sister." Emma stood. "It's nice to meet you." Vanessa tilted her head. "You've made quite the entrance." Emma blinked. "I just want to help Noah." Vanessa's smile didn't move past her lips. "Well, be mindful. Temporary fixtures aren't meant to get too comfortable." Emma held her gaze. "I'm not here to decorate the furniture. I'm here because Noah needs someone who sees him." A long pause passed before Vanessa stepped back. Chris believes, quote, "The last person who thought she mattered here learned otherwise." With that, she swept out. Emma closed the door and returned to Noah's drawing. She taped it gently to the inside of her wardrobe. A private reminder, a promise. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was the beginning of something she didn't yet understand, but felt down to her bones. The days slipped into rhythm, quiet but steady. Each morning, Emma arrived in the study to find Noah already waiting with his books and a hopeful smile. He had begun to ask more questions, challenge math problems, and even read aloud with excitement, his confidence growing like a vine reaching for light. Damien noticed. Though he rarely said anything, his glances toward Emma during breakfast were different now. Less guarded, more curious. One afternoon, Emma walked into the library and paused. A porcelain teacup, still warm, sat at her usual corner of the table, next to a bookmarked poetry collection. She frowned softly. She hadn't brought tea. Had the staff, but when she turned, she saw Damien in the archway, leaning on the doorframe. "You prefer Earl Grey, right?" he asked. She blinked. "Yes, but how did you know?" He shrugged. "You always drink it when you think no one's paying attention." Emma smiled, a little surprised. "Thank you." He didn't reply, just nodded and left. Later that evening, as she returned to her room after tucking Noah in, she found a package on her nightstand, wrapped in simple brown paper. No note. She opened it slowly. Inside was a hardcover edition of The Secret Garden, the same book she'd been rereading in the library the past few nights. But this one was old, beautifully bound, with golden lettering. She held the book to her chest. No signature, no message, but she knew who it was. The following week brought more moments like that. small gestures that chipped away at the cold wall Damien had built around himself. A nod here, a pause in conversation. Once, she found him sitting beside Noah during reading time, watching his son sound out a sentence with deliberate focus. Emma didn't say anything, she just smiled and let the silence wrap around them like a blanket. Still, at night, her peace didn't always last. The nightmares came in flashes, blood, broken glass. Emma would jolt awake, her breath caught in her throat, clutching the sheet like it could anchor her. She never screamed. She'd trained herself not to. But her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the bed, staring into the dark. She always checked the drawer after her, just to see it was still there. One morning, Damien found her in the garden with Noah, who was excitedly explaining how bees make honey. Emma crouched beside a flowering shrub, her laughter soft and free. After Noah ran ahead to chase a butterfly, Damien sat on the nearby bench. He's different now, brighter. Emma looked over. He's always been bright. He just needed someone to see it. Damien hesitated, then asked, "What about you?" She blinked. "What about me?" "You always deflect. You're kind, you listen, but I don't know anything about you." Emma looked down, brushing a leaf with her fingers. Some stories are better left closed. He studied her quietly but didn't press. That night, just after midnight, a knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Damien standing there, pale and serious. "It's Noah," he said. "He's running a fever." Emma followed him down the hall without hesitation. They entered Noah's room, where the boy lay curled under his blanket, cheeks flushed and breath shallow. Emma went to him immediately, placing a cool hand on his. "It's high. We need to bring it down." Damien stood frozen at the foot of the bed, helpless. Emma gently dampened a cloth, wiped Noah's forehead, and whispered soft reassurances. She sang an old lullaby her mother used to sing. Noah stirred but didn't wake fully. As the minutes stretched into hours, she stayed seated beside him, alert and steady. Behind her, Damien watched. He didn't speak. He just stood there, as if afraid his presence would break the spell she had woven. When the fever finally eased, Emma leaned back in the chair and exhaled. Her shoulders sagged with relief. Damien stepped closer. "You didn't have to stay." Emma looked at him. "Of course I did." He looked at Noah, then at her. "You're the first person who's ever made this house feel human." Their eyes met. His hand moved slightly, as if to reach for hers. For a moment, they hovered, two people suspended in something fragile and unfamiliar. Then Emma pulled her hand back. She stood, quietly excusing herself. "I'll check on him again in an hour." She returned to her room, heart pounding. She opened her drawer, revealing a folded photograph. A boy with soft eyes and a crooked smile smiled up at her. "Your brother." But never far. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, the photo still resting in her lap. Her fingers traced the edge of her brother's smile, a memory locked behind layers of pain and silence. He had only been 17 when the accident happened. She had been the one driving. One wrong turn, one slick road, 1 second too late. He never blamed her, not once. But she had never forgiven herself. She folded the photo carefully and placed it back in the drawer beneath a stack of lesson plans. The house was still quiet. Damien hadn't followed her. Part of her wished he had. The other part was relieved. She couldn't afford to grow attached. Not here, not again. The next morning came with golden light streaking through her window. Birds chirped faintly outside, and somewhere down the hall, Noah was already up and humming. Emma changed quickly and joined him in the kitchen, where the cook had laid out breakfast. To her surprise, Damien was seated at the island, dressed casually for once, stirring cream into his coffee. He looked up. "He's better." Emma nodded. "He's strong." There was a pause, not quite awkward, just charged. "Thank you," Damien said quietly. Emma glanced at him. "For what?" "For caring. Most people here just work around him. You don't." Emma's throat tightened. "He deserves more than being tolerated." He nodded, eyes distant. "So did his mother. But she didn't stay." Emma said nothing. She hadn't asked about Noah's mother. It had always felt like a locked room in the house, there, looming, but untouchable. Damien seemed to read her silence. She left after the diagnosis, said she couldn't live in a house full of shadows. I told myself I didn't need anyone, then I started believing it. Emma looked down. Noah never believed that. He still wants a family. Damien didn't answer. Later that day, Emma and Noah painted birdhouses in the garden. His hands were covered in blue and green, his laughter echoing off the stone walls. She leaned back on her elbows and watched him play, soaking in the sound of joy. She didn't notice Damien on the balcony until she turned and saw him standing there, arms crossed but not guarded, just watching. That night, Emma returned to her room and found a note under her pillow. 3 words, handwritten in neat script. I see you. No signature, no explanation. She stared at it for a long time. Over the next few days, the distance between them began to shrink. Not dramatically, not all at once. But in increments, Damien asked questions about her teaching methods. Emma began to leave books on the counter where she knew he'd find them. He started joining Noah and her brief breakfasts, sometimes dinner. Always quiet, always measured, but one evening, as a storm rolled in and thunder rumbled in the distance, Noah begged for a story. They all gathered in the library. Emma on the couch, Noah curled against her, Damien sitting nearby in an armchair. Emma read aloud, her voice carrying through the dimly lit room. Halfway through, the power flickered. Noah clutched her hand. Damien stood and lit the nearest lantern, without hesitation, placing it on the table between them. His movements were calm, reassuring. When Emma resumed reading, she felt his eyes on her. After Noah fell asleep, Damien offered to carry him upstairs. Emma followed. At the bedroom door, Damien lingered. He trusts you, he said. Emma nodded. He's easy to love. He looked at her. You're not what I expected. She met his gaze, holding it. Neither are you. There was a beat of silence, then he stepped back and let her pass. In her room, she returned to the drawer and pulled out her brother's photo once more. But this time, she placed it on the nightstand. She was still grieving, still healing, but for the first time in a long time, the weight felt just a little lighter. And the walls around her heart? They were starting to crack. The cemetery was quiet that morning, shrouded in mist and the distant hum of rustling leaves. Emma stood before a small headstone, her hands trembling slightly as she laid a white carnation at its base. The name, etched in the gray marble, still hit her like a punch to the ribs every time she saw it. Daniel Lane, 2007-2020. Too bright for this world. She knelt slowly, brushing away leaves that had gathered along the edge. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm still here, Danny. The wind answered in sighs through the trees. Daniel had only been 13 when he died, thin, anxious, always clinging to her like a lifeline in a world that had never wanted them. After their mother died, Emma fought to keep custody of him while working 2 jobs. It was hard, exhausting. But she had never given up on him. Until the day someone else did. A neighbor's report, a misunderstanding, a bruise Daniel got from falling on the school playground. It didn't matter how much she explained, how much Daniel cried and begged not to be taken. The system acted fast, assuming guilt before truth. They removed him, placed him in temporary foster care. And within 8 months, he was gone, dead from untreated pneumonia in a group home that had been flagged 3 times for neglect. The agency closed the case like it was paperwork. Emma's life shattered. Her teaching license was quietly suspended. Schools stopped returning her calls, friends disappeared. The world that once called her dedicated Chung now called her dangerous. She spiraled. There were months she barely got out of bed. It took years to rebuild herself, brick by careful brick. Private tutoring, part-time volunteer work. She avoided the headlines, the rumors, the pity, until she couldn't anymore. Now, standing here, years later, she felt both everything and nothing. I should have done more, she whispered. I should have found a way. She didn't notice the figure standing at the edge of the path until the wind shifted. Damien Kingston had followed her. He stood silently, hands in his coat pockets, eyes locked on the tombstone. Emma stiffened but didn't speak. She hadn't meant for him to know this part of her. Not yet, maybe not ever. But he walked forward, stopped beside her. "Daniel was your brother," he said softly. She nodded once. Damien glanced at the grave again. "What happened?" Emma exhaled, her shoulders sagging under the weight of the memories. "He was taken from me. Wrongly. The system saw a tired teacher with too many shifts and a kid with bruises. They made their judgment. I lost everything." Damien said nothing for a long moment. Then, with a voice low and sharp, he said, "That's monstrous. I was labeled unstable, dangerous. My license was suspended quietly with no official explanation. No appeal process, no chance to speak." Emma didn't realize her hands were shaking until Damien reached out, gently covering one with his. "You don't owe me an explanation," he said, "but thank you for trusting me with it." She looked up, blinking back sudden tears. "I didn't mean for you to come here. I followed because I wanted to understand," he paused. "And I'm glad I did." As they walked back toward the car, the silence between them had shifted. It wasn't cold anymore. It was full of knowing. Later that evening, back at the Kingston estate, Vanessa stood in Damien's office with a glass of wine in her hand and a frown etched deep into her brow. "You're letting her get too close," she said. "This isn't like you." Damien didn't look up from his desk. "What is like me?" Vanessa. "She's not one of us. She's emotional, messy, vulnerable. And you're slipping." He finally met her eyes. "Maybe slipping is exactly what I need." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake," he said calmly. "I'm making a choice." The next morning, Emma sat at the breakfast table with Noah, gently helping him sound out words from a storybook. His smile came easier now, his confidence blooming with every page turned. She poured syrup onto his waffles in the shape of a smiley face, and he giggled. Small, precious sounds that reminded her of Daniel at that age. That same gap-toothed grin, that same instinct to love without question. Damien entered the room quietly, observing from the doorway. His gaze lingered on the simple domesticity of the scene, so rare in the cold vastness of the Kingston estate. Emma looked up and offered a soft smile. He returned it with something that almost looked like peace. Later, as she stepped out onto the terrace for fresh air, her phone buzzed. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Aline." The voice on the other end was professional, clipped. "This is Catherine Doyle from the Department of Child Welfare. I wanted to inform you that a formal inquiry has been launched regarding the late supervisor of the Montford Foster Group home, Benjamin Cross." Emma froze. The name hit her like ice down her spine. "What? Why now?" "The complaints. Here are multiple complaints resurfacing, and new evidence has prompted a complete audit of his cases, including the one involving your brother, Daniel." Emma's hand tightened around the phone. Her voice was barely audible. "What kind of evidence?" "I'm not at liberty to say just yet, but I thought you deserved to know." Emma hung up slowly, her heart thudding in her chest. She stared out at the garden, dazed. It didn't feel real. That door had been locked for years. Now someone had opened it. That evening, Damien walked into his study and closed the door behind him. His private investigator, Nathan Cole, stood by the window, a folder in hand. "We've found the documents," Nathan said. "Your instincts were right. The foster home's management ignored repeated medical requests. There's record of Emma trying to follow up, but the supervisor deliberately blocked her access." Damien's jaw clenched. "I want everything compiled, emails, timestamps, internal memos. Make sure the department has it." "Quiet." Nathan nodded. "It's already in motion." As he left, Damien leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. There was satisfaction, but also fury. Fury that it had taken this long. That someone so capable, so warm, had been silenced for years because of institutional cruelty. He glanced at the framed photo of Noah on his desk and thought of Emma, crouching beside his son with hands full of paint and heart full of patience. She deserved better, and he would make sure she got it. Meanwhile, Emma sat alone in her room, clutching the phone to her chest. She didn't know what had sparked the sudden review. She didn't know who had forced the system to look again, but for the first time since Daniel's death, a flicker of hope pulsed in her chest. She pulled the photograph from her drawer and placed it gently beside her lamp, next to her lesson planner and the latest drawing Noah had given her. In it, she, Noah, and Damien stood hand in hand beneath a crooked sun and a big blue sky. "Family," it said. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they weren't from grief. They were something else. A whisper of justice, a breath of healing, and somewhere deep inside her, a tiny crack of possibility that maybe she hadn't been wrong to trust again. The invitation arrived, folded in silver parchment, slid discreetly beneath Emma's bedroom door. At first, she thought it was a mistake, until she unfolded it and read Damien Kingston's elegant signature at the bottom. "Please join us for the Kingston Foundation Annual Gala." Then, scrawled by hand beneath the printed words, "Noah would love to see you there." So would I. Emma stared at it for a long time, her heart pounding. A gala? She didn't even own a proper dress. But Lucy, the head housekeeper, seemed to be expecting the dilemma. "Don't worry," she said with a smile the next morning. "We've got just the thing. Mrs. Kingston's old collection never saw the light of day after her departure. It's time someone wore it with grace again." Emma hesitated as she slipped into the midnight blue gown later that evening. The fabric hugged her curves delicately, modest but stunning. Her hair was pulled into soft waves. When she stepped out into the hallway, Noah gasped. "You look like a princess," he exclaimed, running up to hug her. His little tuxedo was slightly crooked, but his grin was perfect. Damien stood a few steps behind him, frozen. His gaze traveled slowly from her hair to her heels. "You look extraordinary." Emma flushed. "I feel like an imposter." "No," Ned said firmly. "You're the most real person in this room tonight." The gala was held at a grand hotel ballroom, aglow with chandeliers and soft music. Guests shimmered in designer gowns and tailored suits. Emma kept close to Noah, her nerves bundled tightly beneath her borrowed dress. But as the night unfolded, whispers began. "Who's the woman with Damien Kingston? His date? She's not from our circle, is she?" Emma smiled politely, clutching Noah's hand tighter. She didn't belong here, she knew it, but when Damien placed his hand lightly on her lower back and guided her toward the main floor, she stood a little taller. He introduced her as Noah's tutor, his son's greatest blessing. The crowd nodded, smiled, but some eyes lingered too long. Then came Vanessa. She appeared in a flash of red silk and icy charm, her champagne flute held high. She tapped it once with a fork, demanding attention. "Before the night gets away from us," Vanessa said smoothly, "let's raise a glass to resilience, to redemption, to those who rise from scandal with their heads held high, even when their pasts are far from innocent." The room fell silent. Emma stiffened. She could feel every eye turning toward her. Vanessa smiled, a dagger behind her lips. Emma Lane, everyone, once accused of child neglect, now elevated to Kingston royalty. Quite the fairy tale. A gasp rippled across the crowd. Emma's breath caught, her skin prickled. She turned and ran out the ballroom, down the marble stairs, out into the crisp night air. The sound of laughter and glasses clinking followed her like ghosts. She leaned against a column, shaking. Hot tears stung her eyes. Why did she come? Why did she think she could ever belong? Footsteps followed. She turned. Damien stood at the bottom of the steps. No tie, no mask of composure. Just Damien, just a man looking at a woman as though he saw her, truly saw her. "Don't say you're sorry," her voice cracking. "Don't say you're sorry. Don't say it's fine. I don't need your pity." He came closer. "I'm not sorry you were there, and I don't pity you. I admire you." She froze. "I brought you tonight," he continued, "because I wanted them to see what courage looks like." And then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for her hand and held it. A camera flash exploded in the distance. Emma didn't pull away. The photo hit the internet before they even returned to the estate. By morning, Emma's name was trending. On one side, sympathy, awe, praise. Brave teacher stands tall, Kingston CO embraces tutor with a past. On the other side, venom. Is she using him? Damaged goods. What kind of example is this for his son? Emma sat at the edge of her bed, scrolling through comments with shaking hands. The backlash was louder than she had expected, more vicious, and though Damien had stood beside her, the echo of Vanessa's voice still clung to her thoughts like smoke. She didn't cry, not yet, she just stared. A knock at the door pulled her out of the spiral. "Come in," she said softly. It was Noah. He padded in barefoot, holding a piece of paper. "I drew something," he whispered. "Can I show you?" She nodded. Noah crawled onto the bed and held out the drawing. It was the three of them again, Emma, Damien, and Noah, standing under a tree, hands clasped. But this time, a storm cloud hovered above them, and still, the family stood smiling together. Emma traced the crayon lines with her fingers. "Are you mad?" he asked. She blinked. "Why would I be mad, sweetheart?" "You're saying bad things about you. I heard Lucy and one of the chefs talking." He hesitated. "Are you going to leave me too?" That broke her. Tears spilled freely now as she pulled him into her arms, holding him tighter than she ever had. "Never," she whispered. "I would never leave you." He held her back just as tightly. "You're my favorite grown-up." Her chest ached with emotion. Guilt, fear, love, all tangled together. How could she leave when this little boy looked at her like she was home? That evening, Damien knocked gently on her door. She opened it, her face blotchy from crying, but her eyes steady. "I almost quit this morning," she said simply. "I packed my things, I was ready to go." Damien looked pained. "But then your son asked me if I was leaving him, and I realized something," she continued. "I've spent most of my life running, first from the system, then grief, and now I'm tired of running." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I never should have let Vanessa speak. I thought I could protect you." She shook her head. "It wasn't your job to protect me. I walked into that room on my own 2 feet. I can walk back in again." Damien took a breath, his voice low. "Then stay. Not just for Noah. For you. For us." Emma met his gaze. There it was again. That fragile, tender thread between them that neither dared name, yet couldn't deny. "I'll stay," she said. "But I don't want to be hidden. I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be enough." "You are," Damien said, reaching for her hand again. "You've always been." He kissed her knuckles, soft and reverent. And for the first time in years, Emma believed him. The days after the gala passed in a haze. Emma kept to herself, avoiding the public eye and the internet. Lucy ran interference at the estate, screening calls and shielding her from curious staff and media inquiries. Even Noah seemed more careful with his words, sensing her need for quiet. Emma smiled when she needed to, played card games with him in the afternoon, but inside she felt numb, like something had cracked and hadn't yet finished breaking. On the third morning, Damien walked into his sister's office unannounced. Vanessa looked up from her laptop, her eyes narrowing as he shut the door behind him. "Well," she said, "if you're here to thank me for revealing the truth, I'll save you the trouble." "I'm not," Damien said calmly. "I'm here to tell you you're done." Vanessa blinked. "Excuse me?" "I've already spoken to the board. You're being removed from all company affairs. Permanently." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "You can't do that." "I can, and I have." She stood, furious. "All because of that woman?" Damien's voice turned cold. "Because of what you did to that woman, and because you used this company, my family's name, to humiliate someone who didn't deserve it." Vanessa's face twisted. "She's a liability, a scar on your reputation. She's the reason my son smiles again." That ended it. Damien turned on his heel and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Vanessa's scream echoed against the glass walls, but he didn't stop. That evening, he knocked gently on Emma's door. She didn't answer at first, but after a pause, it creaked open. He stepped inside, holding a small envelope. "I need to show you something." Emma's eyes were tired, wary. "I'm not sure I can handle more surprises." "This one is different," he said softly. She took the envelope and opened it. Inside were photocopies of legal documents, email chains, affidavits, transcripts. Emma scanned the pages, her breath catched as she recognized names. The old caseworkers, the facility director, and then, highlighted section, proof of falsified records. A whistleblower testimony. The note, Miss Lane was not at fault. Her hands trembled. How? "I hired a legal team," Damien said. Quietly, "I didn't want to pressure you, but I needed to know the truth for myself." Emma sat down slowly. "And now you do." "I do," he said, "and I want you to know what they did to you. It was wrong, deeply, but it's not your story anymore." Her eyes welled. The tears came silently, flowing down her cheeks without a sound. "I'm not crying because I'm angry," she whispered. "I'm crying because someone finally believed me." Damien knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. "You saved my son," he said. "Let me protect you now." So the next morning, Emma rose early. The sun filtered gently through the windows, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like hiding. She dressed simply, tucked Noah's favorite snack into her purse, and found him waiting by the front steps, already dressed, holding a small bouquet of daisies in his hand. "Are we really going to meet your brother?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, I think it's time." The cemetery sat on a quiet hill just outside the city. It was peaceful, surrounded by willow trees and worn stone paths. As they approached the grave, Noah clutched her hand tighter. Emma knelt slowly before the tombstone, brushing off a few leaves. "Daniel Lane," Noah read aloud, 2007 to 2020. Emma placed a hand on the stone. He was just 13. First, Noah knelt beside her and gently placed the daisies. "Do you think he would have liked me?" She turned, cupping his small face in her hands. "She would have loved you, Noah, so much." He nodded, his eyes wide. Then, in a gesture that cracked her heart open again, he leaned over and whispered, "Hi, Daniel. I'm Emma's friend, and I miss her when she's sad." Emma couldn't speak. She could only hug him, letting the wind carry away her silence. Later that afternoon, Damien asked Emma to join him for a short drive. She hesitated, but Noah urged her on. "You'll like it, I promise." The car pulled into a modest neighborhood, past small houses and vacant lots. They stopped at an old brick building with boarded windows. Emma frowned. "What is this?" Damien smiled. "It was a community center once, closed down after funding was pulled." He stepped out of the car, leading her to the door. "I bought it, renovated it, and now it's open again." Emma stepped inside, her breath catching. The space was clean and bright. Shelves lined the walls, children's books, art supplies, desks, a warm reading corner in one room, a small teacher's lounge in another. She turned to Damien, stunned. "In memory of Daniel Lane," he said gently, "a place for children like him, and a place for teachers like you." Tears returned, but this time they were lighter. They didn't sting. They healed. "Damien," she whispered, this is everything." He stepped closer. "You gave me back my son. You gave him a future. This is just a small piece of what you deserve." Emma looked around, her chest rising with emotion. "No, this is more than I ever dreamed of." She turned back toward him, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a woman surviving scandal. She felt like a woman building something, rooted in pain, yes, but rising from it too. Damien reached for her hand. "This isn't charity, Emma, it's legacy." And this time, she didn't pull away. She laced her fingers through his and smiled. The envelope sat on Emma's nightstand like a question she was afraid to answer. She had found it after breakfast, neatly propped against her teacup, sealed in navy blue and stamped with the Kingston Foundation's crest. Her name, written in elegant ink, looked more personal than formal. But the tension it carried was unmistakable. She turned it over slowly, heart thudding. Inside was a formal offer, full-time director of education for the Kingston Foundation. Salary, benefits, staff. But beneath the contract was something else. A handwritten note. Emma's hands shook slightly as she unfolded it. This isn't charity. This is recognition. You've changed lives, not just Noah's, but mine too. Let this be a new beginning, not out of pity, but out of respect. Emma pressed the paper against her chest. The weight of the moment anchored her. She wasn't sure whether to cry or smile. That evening, she found Damien walking through the east garden. The air was calm, but the wind had started to pick up storm clouds heavy in the distance. "You read it," he said without turning. "I did," she replied, stopping beside him. His eyes met hers, uncertain but hopeful. "Is it too much?" Emma exhaled. "Honestly, maybe. I never imagined a life like that." "You've always deserved more than what life handed you," he said quietly. She nodded. "Then I accept on one condition." A flicker of amusement passed through his expression. "What's that?" "I still get to teach Noah." Damien laughed. "I thought that was already settled." She smiled. "It means the most to me. I don't want to lose that." "You won't," he said softly. In the following days, the announcement went public. Media outlets praised the decision, highlighting Emma's redemption arc, her impact, and her story of resilience. Some skeptics remained, but Damien silenced the noise by standing beside her at every press event. At the estate, life resumed with a newfound rhythm. Noah flourished. His laughter was louder, his questions bolder. He began painting with more detail, asking Emma about feelings and stories and dreams. Damien often watched from a distance, admiring the way she knelt beside his son, how she never talked down to him, how she listened like every word Noah said mattered. One evening, the skies turned charcoal gray, thunder rumbled in the distance. By nightfall, the storm was overhead. A power outage swept through the estate. Emma lit candles in the hallway, making her way to Noah's room to calm him. Once he'd fallen asleep in her arms, she gently tucked him in and returned to the main sitting room. Damien was already there, placing candles across the mantel. Their eyes met in the flickering light. The storm raged outside, but in the quiet between them, something softer stirred. "You've built something beautiful here," she said, looking around. "I didn't," Damien replied. "You did." She turned toward him, startled. "You saved more than my son," he said, stepping closer. "You saved me." Lightning flashed behind him, illuminating his face in brief golden streaks. He paused, then leaned in slowly. And this time, Emma didn't pull away. Their lips met in a kiss, gentle, hesitant, full of everything unspoken. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it was real. When they parted, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the estate bathed in golden light. The grounds glistened, the trees damp with dew, and the air carried a rare stillness, like something had shifted in the night. Emma awoke with a softness in her chest. She moved through the mansion like it was a place she belonged to, not merely passed through. She found Noah in the sunroom, hunched over a fresh sheet of paper with his favorite colored pencils spread around him. He didn't notice her at first. She leaned gently over his shoulder. "What are you drawing, bud?" Noah looked up, his face lighting up. "It's us." Emma's eyes dropped to the page. 3 stick figures stood in a row. One was clearly her elder son, hair pulled back in a bun, a bright yellow dress. One was Noah himself, holding her hand, and the third, a taller figure, wearing a tie and smiling with soft blue eyes. All 3 held hands beneath a red sun. The caption read in big, crayon-scrawled letters, "My family." Emma's throat tightened. She crouched beside him, tracing the little details he had added. The freckles on her cheeks, the trees behind them, the laughter in the curved lines of their mouths. "You like it?" Noah asked, suddenly shy. Emma nodded, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "I love it." That afternoon, Damien joined them in the garden. Noah ran to him, proudly holding up the drawing. Damien took it with a soft smile, studying it for longer than expected. He looked at Emma, something quiet and certain in his gaze. "You're not just part of our lives, Emma," he said. "You're the piece we didn't know we were missing." She blinked back emotion. "And you're the piece I stopped believing I deserve it." They sat beneath the willow tree, the three of them, Damien, Emma, and Noah, watching clouds roll gently through the sky. That evening, Emma stood on the terrace alone, watching the sun set in amber waves across the estate's rolling hills. Damien stepped beside her, hands in his pockets, the drawing tucked safely into the book he carried. "I don't want to scare this," he said softly. "I don't want to name it too soon." Emma turned to him, her voice just above a whisper. "It's not fragile, Damien. It's just new." They stood quietly, the silence filled not with uncertainty but with peace. Damien reached for her hand again, and this time their fingers laced naturally, like they had always known the way. And somewhere behind them, Noah giggled from the hallway. Later that night, Emma tucked the little crayon drawing into her own journal, between the pages of her past and the blank ones of her future. For the first time in years, she didn't dread the next chapter. She was ready to write it with them. Together. The day the community center reopened, the air buzzed with anticipation. Sunlight spilled across the front steps as families gathered, some curious, others already emotional. Reporters lined the sidewalk, but this time, there were no whispered scandals, no cold questions wrapped in judgment. There was only admiration, respect. At the center of it all stood Emma, her nerves held in place by the warmth of the little hand clasped inside hers. Noah beamed up at her. "Are you going to speak now?" She smiled. "I think so." From the small podium set just beneath the center's new sign, the Daniel Lane Learning Center, Emma faced the growing crowd. Damien stood off to the side, watching with quiet pride, one hand resting lightly on Noah's shoulder. She cleared her throat, her voice shaking only for a moment. "I lost my brother," she began. "I thought the world had turned its back on me. I thought I had no place left to belong. But today, I stand in front of this building, not as someone who was broken, but as someone who was rebuilt by love, by faith, and by second chances." A murmur swept through the crowd. Emma glanced toward the memorial wall behind her, where Daniel's framed photo rested, surrounded by flowers and a plaque that read, "Every child deserves to be seen." She continued, her voice stronger now. "And this building? This center isn't just bricks and books, it's hope. It's healing, it's a promise that no one will be forgotten." The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. Damien stepped forward then, his hand brushing against the small of her back. She turned, and for a moment, the world fell away. "My brother would be proud," he whispered. Emma nodded, blinking back tears. "I hope so." As the ceremony wrapped and families toured the building, Emma stayed outside for a moment, catching her breath. Noah ran over, still gripping a juice box, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mom?" he called. She turned, stunned. The words slipped out so naturally, so joyfully, she thought maybe she'd misheard it. But then he repeated it, without shame or pause. "Mom, look, they have my drawing inside the art room." Emma froze, her lips parted but no words came. Her eyes darted to Damien. He met her gaze, a smile already tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Emma knelt beside Noah, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I love it, sweetheart. I'm so happy you're proud." As Noah darted away again, Damien stepped closer. "You're worried about what it means?" he asked gently. Emma hesitated. "I just didn't expect it." Damien smiled, placing a hand over hers. "He's not wrong." That night, as twilight sank over the estate, Damien led Emma to the rooftop garden. The air was cool, touched by the last hints of spring. Tiny string lights draped from trellises overhead, and in the center of the garden stood a small table for two, flickering with candlelight. Emma gasped, "Damien?" He didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's heart leapt into her throat. "I spent a lot of time thinking about what I'd say," he began, stepping closer. But then I realized, nothing I say will ever be enough to match what you've done for us. He opened the box. Inside, a simple, elegant ring shimmered beneath the lights. You didn't just save my son, he said. You gave him laughter again, you gave him trust, and in the middle of it all, you gave me a future I never thought I'd deserve. Tears slid down Emma's cheeks before she could stop them. Slowly, Damien finished, his voice steady. Emma Lane, will you marry me? She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She just said yes, wrapped in tears, laughter, and the kind of love that grows out of pain and blooms in second chances. Emma's hands trembled slightly as Damien slipped the ring onto her finger. It wasn't extravagance that moved her, it was what it represented. Healing. Trust. A life she thought she'd never live. They stood beneath the canopy of lights for a long while, arms wrapped around each other, the stars glimmering faintly above. For the first time in years, Emma didn't feel like she was looking up and wishing. She felt like she had already arrived. Weeks passed. Plans were drawn, dresses fitted, invitations quietly sent. There was no grand media frenzy, no boardroom drama, just a small gathering of those who mattered most. The wedding would be held at the Daniel Lane Learning Center, the same place where Emma had once stood to honor her brother and now would stand to begin a new chapter. The morning of the wedding came softly, with sunlight peeking through curtains and the scent of lavender from the center's gardens wafting inside. Emma stood in the mirror, adjusting the delicate neckline of her gown. It wasn't designer, it wasn't extravagant, it was hers, a symbol of who she had become. Lucy helped with the final touches. You look like yourself, she whispered. Emma smiled. That's the best compliment I could ask for her. Downstairs, Damien paced, adjusting his cufflinks with shaky fingers. Vanessa, now distant from the spotlight, sat quietly in the back row, not as an enemy, but as a guest still learning to let go. Noah, dressed in a tiny suit with a crooked bow tie, carried a white satin pillow and kept grinning at everyone who looked his way. The ceremony began. Children lined the aisle, giggling and tossing flower petals, their joy untamed and pure. A gentle instrumental played in the background. One Noah had chosen himself from a movie Emma used to read to him. Emma stepped through the double doors, her arm linked with Damien's. No tradition, no pretense, just a walk together, side by side. Damien looked at her, his eyes full of something deep and unwavering. Ready? He whispered. Emma nodded, more than ever. The aisle was lined with familiar faces, teachers from her old school, parents of students she'd mentored, neighbors from her small apartment complex, even the new social workers who had taken over Daniel's old case. But at the end of it all stood Noah, his eyes shining, his smile wide. As they reached the front, Emma took Damien's hands in hers. Their vows were not scripted or rehearsed. I promise, Damien said, voice thick, to never let silence live between us again. To choose you, even on the hardest days. To stand beside you, not just when it's easy, but when it's dark. Emma's hand squeezed his. I promise to see you, Damien. Not just the businessman or the father, but the man with pain, hope, and the heart to heal. I promise to love the life we build, not for what it looks like, but for how it feels. As they kissed, a breeze swept through the garden. At the edge of the center courtyard, a gentle wind lifted the edge of the fabric curtain draped over the memorial wall. Daniel's photo fluttered for just a moment, as if caught in the blessing of the moment. It settled softly again. Emma saw it and blinked away a tear, heartful. Later, under the canopy of sunset and string lights, Noah danced in a circle, giggling between guests. Mom, Gad, come dance. Emma glanced at Damien. He smiled, already reaching for her hand. I early joined Noah in the circle, laughing, twirling, letting go. No longer teacher and CEO. No longer stranger and child. But a family born not of blood but of choice, pain, and love that endured.